Hello and welcome to the Innovation Women Speak webinar series. My name is Bobby Carlton. I'm the founder of Innovation Women. Innovation Women is a visibility bureau for entrepreneurial, technical, and professional women. We connect women with speaking opportunities, and we connect event managers with awesome speakers who just happen to be women. Our mission is to eliminate the all-male, all-pale, and often all-stale panels you see so often at industry conferences and events. Innovation Women is just so much more than a traditional speakers bureau. Event managers can search the database for free, and speakers pay just $100 a year to become a member. We also promote your speaking engagements as part of your Innovation Women membership. We recently rolled out a number of new features on Innovation Women. Event managers can post calls for speakers. Speakers can search and apply for those speaking opportunities. We also have new search functionality as well as public profiles and shareable links for our members. If you'd like more information on Innovation Women, check out our website. For webinar attendees, we have a special offer of 20% off your first year until midnight tonight. That makes a membership in Innovation Women equivalent to coffee money. It costs you only about the same amount as buying a couple of Starbucks lattes every single month. So before we go to today's speaker, I'd like to give a plug for our next speaker. On August 15th, I will be having a fireside chat with Alyssa DeVer, the co-founder and Chief Confidence Officer at the American Confidence Institute. We're going to be talking total BS, using brain science, that's the BS part, debunk and transform the business of speaking. We'll talk about why so many speakers fail and the real secrets to speaking success. Whether you're a speaker or an event professional, learn a little bit of brain science to give yourself and your audience real, sustained confidence. You'll be learning the benefits and challenges of being a part-time or full-time professional speaker, how to use brain science to make speaking more fulfilling for you and your audience, and some expert tips on optimizing speaking revenue and or career opportunities. So please note, for those of you who are attending our webinars usually on a Wednesday, this is actually going to be on a Thursday. We've posted a link to sign up for this webinar in the Attachments and Links tab on your screen, so sign up today. Now on to today's featured speaker. Kelly is going to join us today to talk about women and money, 5 steps to creating financial freedom. Kelly is the founder and CEO at Personal Finance Warrior. Kelly is a finance professional with 15 years of investment, money management, and personal finance experience. She's passionate about empowering individuals to take ownership and responsibility of their personal finance. This is what inspired Kelly to establish Personal Finance Warrior, a financial consulting platform for women. And before starting her own company, she served as a portfolio consultant at Natixis Global Asset Management. She's also served in a variety of roles at top companies in the industry, such as Citi and JP Morgan. Now, before we get to Kelly's presentation, I'd just like to review with you the features of the Bright Talk screen. This is an annotated version of your screen. Below the video viewing window, there are some tabs. The default tab is Ask a Question. You can type in a question or a comment at any point during the program. The Attachments or Links tab is where you'll see documents from our speaker and the link to sign up for our next webinar. You can download the attachments at any time as well. The tab called Rate This helps determine what you like. We read all the feedback, and you can enlarge the screen to view it in full screen mode. If at any time you need audio help, feel free to click on the help button at the bottom of the screen. So now on to today's presentation. Take it away, Kelly.
So thank you, Bobby, and thanks to Innovation Women for hosting me. Ladies, I am super excited to be here, and my first question is, are you ready to become a personal finance warrior? So I like to say I train women to be finance warriors like Wonder Woman, the warrior. And so I chose the name Warrior for the name of my company as it represents courage and the training of new skills. And so what I want to encourage you is personal finance is about learning about the skills involved with personal finance. And so today's training, we're going to review the 5 steps to create financial freedom. And I believe that today's training is going to change your financial life. I stand by that. And so please stay tuned throughout the presentation, and there'll be some fun bonuses at the end. So let's get started here. So first, I'm going to start off with my 10 warrior rules. And so if you've seen my website, you may have come across these. And I'm going to highlight 3 that I often refer to. And so number 1 is I encourage women to take personal responsibility for their personal finances, whether you're in a relationship or not. And I'll share that when a man read my top 10 warrior rules, he said, Kelly, who else is going to take responsibility for my personal finances than me? And so I thought that number 1 is I want to encourage ladies is to encourage you, it's your responsibility to take control of your finances, and I'm going to help you do that. Number 5 is I encourage women to talk about money with each other. We often think that money may be a taboo subject, and I want to encourage more women to talk about money. I imagine that my favorite is walking down the street in New York City. Men are constantly talking about money, especially if you stop on a corner when there's a red light and you hear 2 men. They're talking about their roles. They're talking about how they're going to make more money and have more responsibility. And then rule number 9 for those individuals who are in a partnership, that to review your household accounts. That often an individual within a household, one may take greater responsibility, and I want to encourage you to make sure that you review all of your household accounts, especially as we have all these electronic accounts. Now, married women tell me that it should be a lot higher, so you can let me know. And so one of the first questions that I want to ask is, and I'm going to include it in the, it says presenter to audience announcements, is what is the first word that comes to mind when you hear the word money? So I'm going to include that, and you can add that comment in the questions or in the feedback. And so what I want to do is I want to encourage interaction throughout this presentation. If you have some questions, to add it to the questions section. I'm going to see if I can incorporate the questions as we move along. If not, I'm going to save time at the end to be able to answer questions directly. So continuing on, Kelly, why do you focus on women with your training? And so there are 3 key reasons why it's critical for women to invest. Number 1 is women live 8 years longer than men. We need our money to last longer. Number 2, women earn 80 cents on the dollar as part of the gender pay gap. And so for those ladies who are entrepreneurs, you often have more flexibility as to the amount of money that you're making. And so we're making a difference to try to change that 80 cents on the dollar. And negotiation is an important part of that I include in my training. And then number 3, women often take time off for children and elderly parents. and that's often not talked about, and the financial implications of that are often not talked about, and that's something that I include in my training and in the research that I do. And then lastly, really where all of this comes from is in the U.S., women only have 1 or 2 generations of working women. So I'm excited to share that I was in Chicago over the weekend and I saw Hamilton on Friday night. So Alexander Hamilton, who created our nation's financial system and the first Treasury Secretary. Well, Alexander Hamilton and men have been talking about money for centuries. And so us women really only have 1 or 2 generations of working women. Did your mom work? Did your grandmother work? And so that's often why money is a relatively new conversation for us. And actually last week, I wrote an email to my audience. Later on, you can add yourself to my distribution list, talking about how with the previous generation, was there an opportunity for them to learn about investing? So even for our generation today, there are many more resources to learn about investing for how to make your money work for you, where before it may have been like your mom may have been the budget queen in your household in terms of managing how the spending, managing the spending within the household. But was she really looking at how to make her money work for her? And that is what I encourage with my audience. And I want to give a case study as a specific example of the benefits, of the powerful benefits of engaging with your money. And I'm going to talk about my next example here with Leslie, a business manager. And so first is she is a business manager, and when she did my 8-week online course, and first she realized that she had forgotten about a 401k plan, that she just had worked, that she had worked maybe spent 2 years at a company and just really forgot about it. And when she took a look at it, it was worth $12,000. And what I find with a number of women in my audience is they often have forgotten 401k plans that maybe had $2,000 or $3,000, but a decade later, if you go and you find that, hopefully that was invested, and that's like new money for your retirement account. Next is she had money on the sidelines. She just was hesitant to invest it, and the market is up. So when I wrote this slide, the market was up 20%. We've had some volatility, so the market is up 15% year to date. And so that $30,000 invested in January is now worth, as I like to say, $6,000 more. And so the power of investing and the compounding effect. What I encourage with my audience is long-term investing, but just taking a look at a snapshot. Another point that I emphasize in my training is negotiating. And so Leslie, when she went through my training, she was able to negotiate effectively for a 10% raise. And so that was an additional $6,000. And then lastly, I include budgeting in my training, and she was able to save $1,500 when she reviewed her expenses. And so the total value from her participation in my program was over $25,000. So ladies, when you engage with your money and look for ways for you to make your money work for you, we're talking about tens of thousands of dollars. So I wanted to point that out right from the beginning as we review the 5 steps. And so I want to share a little bit more about me as your host and as your guide here. And so I have more than 15 years of investment experience. I'm a trained financial advisor. My last role was in portfolio construction, and just what that means is that I work with clients and then I'm able to have a conversation including what are the details inside your portfolio. I advise the top advisors across the country about what's inside their portfolio to improve the returns. I went to Harvard and I went to Chicago Booth for my MBA, and I have traveled all over the world. So my goal by the age of 30 was to travel to 6 continents. For me, Antarctica is too cold. I enjoy looking at photos. And I lived in Asia for 4 years. China I was particularly interested in. And in my experience when I was traveling, I saw the rise of middle-class women. And do they understand how to make their money work for them, especially as women may be the first generation income earners, substantial income earners, and do they know the key tenets for how to make their money work for them? And then I also want to share, so this picture is a picture of me when I was about 3 years old, and why personal finance is personal for me is when I was about 3 years old, my mom needed to leave my dad, and she was frozen out of the bank account. And so we moved in December. My mom moved our family, I'm the youngest of 4, from New Jersey to Boston, and there was a knock on the door, and my mom opened the door, and there was a representative of Toys for Tots, and there was a delivery of toys for my family. And my mom, who I like to refer to, Mary from the Bronx, she said, "I'm sorry, sir, I think you've made a mistake. I'm not sure who these are for." And he said, "A neighbor called on your behalf. I believe that you have 4 children and you just moved to Boston, and here are some toys so that your kids have presents for Christmas." And so for the next 2 years, my mom worked multiple jobs to get us back on our feet. And this experience instilled in me the importance of financial education. And as I pursued a career in finance, when I took a step back and saw that women, as I mentioned in my travels, that first generation women, are they really learning about personal finance and making their money work for them? I wanted to step forward and especially wanted to be an advocate for women so that you step into your financial power. And next, let's talk about financial freedom. So I just want to check and see. I posed the question to the audience of what is the first word that comes to mind when you think of the word money? And I'm just going to check and see if anybody has been able to answer that question. Great. So scare, frugal, use conservatively, thank you, anxiety. And thank you for those participating. And so I welcome this ongoing participation and want to encourage you. And so what I hear from my audience most of the time is why engage in personal finance, and why do you want to make your money work for you? It is not necessarily for material goods, which maybe used to be the what people would talk about before, about I want a nice house, I want to be able to afford nicer things. The term that I hear is financial freedom. And what I hear what that means, if you were in one of my live workshops, I was just in Chicago giving a live workshop at Chicago Booth, my alma mater, and what I hear from people is the personal definition of financial freedom, because it often is personal for each of you. So I would like for you to think about that, and even you can write that down as we go through this presentation. But often what I hear is it just means that to have the means to do what I want, when I want, and how I want to do it. And so for some people, that may be that they want to retire early. Many of you may have heard about this FIRE term of financially independent, retire early. It may mean that you want to do more meaningful work, that maybe you're working in a role where you're focused on earning money, but then you want to transition where you may be doing something more meaningful or something where you're using your passion. It may be that you want to have a more flexible lifestyle, that you may be able to want to work from home. That financial freedom means different things for different people, but we often want to think about our why of why do you want to engage more meaningfully with your money. And for those who are interested in that, Simon Sinek, S-I-N-E-K, has a very famous TED Talk on understanding your why. And often included with when you're thinking about money are emotions around money. In my training, I do a whole segment on emotions and money. And so I've already talked about with some individuals, they shared scared, anxiety, some other feelings that come up, embarrassed, shame, some blocks that may come up are you too busy to focus on your finances? You might think it's boring. You might feel concerned that you feel alone. And so just want to acknowledge with personal finance that there is an emotional component of it, and it's helpful just understand, even as we go through this presentation, of what might come up. So I hope you have a pen and paper ready so that if you want to take notes as we go through the next 5 steps. What I like to have my audience have action steps at the end. And so hopefully you'll have at least 5, but usually people have 10 to 15. So let's continue here with the 5 steps. And so we're going to talk about paying off debt. We're going to talk about my money system. You're going to learn about my Wealthy Warrior money system. We're going to talk about a budget formula that you will find helpful when you're thinking about your spending. We're going to talk about ways to maximize your retirement. And then we're going to talk about a way to manage your finances in a fun way on an ongoing basis. So get ready, because this is going to be an action-packed next, let's say, like 30 minutes. And feel free, like I said, to ask questions in the question feature, and then I'll be able to see if I can answer questions and incorporate them as we go along. And so the first step to create financial freedom is to pay off student loans and credit cards. And so I really call this step 0 because for us to think about ways to make your money work for you, I want to make sure that you have your student loans managed and that you've paid off your credit card, your credit card debt. And if you are at the step number 1, you're in a great place, because by listening to this presentation, I want to inspire you to take action. So some details with this. The number 1 question you want to ask yourself with student loans and credit cards is, what is the interest rate? And so if we were in a live workshop, I would ask you, so you have student loans, what is the interest rate that you're paying? Now, if you're a recent graduate, I hear 8 to 10%, which actually really hurts my heart. And for people who are more knowledgeable about interest rates, we know that tends to be a pretty high interest rate. What I recommend is an interest rate between 4 and 6% for student loans. And so often, especially if you've gone to graduate school, after that 6 months where you're working, this can include for undergrad and for graduate students, once you're working for 6 months, I want to encourage you to refinance. And so there's a refinance process. You can actually Google that online. There are online providers, and then you can actually compare what is the interest rate that you're going to get. And so I want to encourage you to think about how can you manage that interest rate for student loans so it's between 4 to 6%. On the credit card side, I actually want you to have a plan to repay that credit card debt as quickly as possible. And so I want you to add some additional payments. One helpful tip is I want to encourage you to look into a 0% interest rate card. And what does that mean? So there's a website, there are several websites, but one website I recommend, creditkarma.com, so credit, K-A-R-M-A.com, that you can look at, that gives a list of, and they have 0% credit cards as one of the segments. I want you to look, the Chase Freedom Card is one of the top credit cards, and I want to encourage you to apply for one. And then if you're able to roll over your credit card debt, sometimes there's a small fee, often 3%. Sometimes you don't pay a fee for that. But it's possible for you to roll over that credit card debt to a 0% card. And if that's not possible, I want you to think about having a 0% credit card as a savvy way for you to buy larger ticket items that you might need to pay over like multiple months. That could be education, that could be training that you are paying for over time, and it actually could be the vacation, especially if that's an experience. I encourage experiences within my audience members, especially with myself as an experienced traveler. I tend to encourage mindful spending within my audience. So not penny pinching, really being mindful about spending. So those are some helpful tips about student loans and credit cards. When we go through my money system, I have a 3-step process, and really paying off, I say managing student loans because one of the other questions that I would like you to be able to answer is, when will you pay off your student loans? Even if it's in 10 years, I want you to have that date in the back of your mind. So if it's, I at this point will be done by 2025, then that you know that you have a plan and you just want to stay on track with your plan. You often may want to add an additional payment to your student loans if that is a priority for you. But those are just some helpful tips around student loans and credit cards for step number 1. So let's move on to step number 2 here. And so we're going to talk about my Wealthy Warrior Women money system. And so I created this as a 3-step process. We're going to talk about different areas of your financial planning, including retirement, but I like to present this as a helpful 3-step system. And I pose the question to you, have you ever learned a money system? Have you ever learned about a framework to think about money more strategically? And that's what I encourage my audience. So we make 6 to 8 financial decisions every day. And what I share with my audience are tips to think about money in a more savvy way in all different areas. So let's take a look at this framework here. So this slide here looks a bit busy. If you are listening to this on the go, or you're working or eating lunch at the same time, there is an image that will be helpful, and you can still listen as we go along, but it may be helpful to take a look back at this visual once we go through the 3 different steps. And so for step number 1, I start off in the middle with your bank account. And so typically I ask my audience, who do you bank with? So I bank with First Republic. I often hear Bank of America, Chase. Sometimes I hear credit unions. I hear some local banks. Often what I hear is that on college campuses, you may have set up a bank account for the first time, and you may still be using that same exact bank account. I was having a meeting with somebody yesterday, and they talked about Baybank here in Boston on campus, and they went through Baybank, Fleet, and then Bank of America. And so I then ask you, where did your bank account come from? And the number 1 question I ask is, what benefit are you getting from your bank account? Because it may be, wow, I never asked myself that question. I bank with First Republic because I want free ATMs wherever I go. I travel frequently, and I don't want to be concerned about finding my bank because the fees can be quite expensive. It can be $7 or $8 because you pay a front-end fee, and then on the back end, you often pay a fee. When I travel internationally, I also get beneficial rates when I do ATM withdrawals. So my question to you is, what benefit are you getting? And this is related to credit cards. And so I'm going to talk about a way to manage your expenses on an ongoing basis. And I share this with people. Some people, they either have the discipline to do this, or they're going to aspire to create the discipline, is to use one main credit card to purchase your expenses so that you are getting a benefit from your spending. So I'll give a specific example. So if we talk about that Chase Freedom card, that for me, I appreciate cash back. So Chase Freedom gives me 1.5% cash back. So typically I'll ask the audience, what's your preference? Do you prefer cash back, or do you prefer travel benefits? And so it may be, if you want to type in that feature, what your preference is. And for those who travel benefits are their priority, I will often ask the audience this, but what is the number 1 travel card in the marketplace? And currently it's the Chase Sapphire Reserve card, where you get 3 times the amount of miles and benefits from your spending. And so that tends to be the best travel card. And for cash back, currently Chase Freedom offers 1.5% cash back. I did hear from an individual in my workshop over the weekend about a 2% cash back through their credit card, but they had been a long-term client, so that's how they generated that benefit from them. Bank of America has a debit card that you can receive 1.5% cash back. So with my question with step number one with the bank account is, how are you managing your money on a day-to-day basis, and are you getting a benefit? Is your bank account offering you a benefit, and that includes if you're using a debit card, or if you're using a credit card, which I like to recommend, where you're paying it off every month. What benefit are you receiving, and are you mindful about it? Do you prefer miles? Do you prefer cash back? And when you use a credit card for your payments, it makes it easier for step number 5 when I talk about an ongoing process to manage your money. And it's also really helpful for those who are saving for a down payment, because it is an accurate reflection of how much money you're spending. So people may say, oh, well, I know how much money is coming into my bank account through direct deposit, and there's either extra money or there's not extra money. And what often happens is you may receive money from other places, you may receive a bonus, there may be other ways that you may not include in thinking about what your actual spending is. And so when using a credit card to track your expenses every month can be a really beneficial way to see how much money you're spending on an annual basis, and even then to compare it from year to year. And so what I found when I was looking for my condo, I saw my spending over 3 years, and I said, that's the amount of money that I typically spend, because we know that in 1 year you may go on a cool international trip and spend more money on that, or you may have several weddings, and we're going to talk about the expense that goes along with not your own wedding, but attending weddings and what that means. So I'm going to answer some of the questions at the end as we go through the slide. So step number 2 of the Wealthy Warrior Women Money System is an emergency savings account. So typically I'll ask my audience, do you have an emergency savings account? And half the room will raise their hands. And then I ask, well, how do you think about it? Do you think about it in terms of months? Is it 3 months? Is it 6 months? Is it longer than that? And so I ask you, and this is another personal question. And so do you feel comfortable with 3 months? If you're just starting off, 3 months of expenses, that's thousands of dollars. That may not seem attainable. And so what I like to recommend, if you're early on starting off, $1,000. Can you set aside $1,000? The most common answer that I hear is 6 months. So 6 months of expenses, and that easily tends to be over $10,000. And why do we have an emergency savings account? So yes, in the chance that we may lose our jobs, we want to have money set aside. An emergency savings account can cover a car, repairs with a car, especially if we commute and we need that car. Another reason is medical expenses, especially as our copays continue to go up. You want to have money set aside. Just like there was an audience member who told me that it took her 4 years for her to have the extra amount of money for her wisdom teeth, for the procedure for her wisdom teeth. Dental often may not be covered very well, and we just want to make sure that we're maintaining our health. And so emergency savings also helps with that. So another question that comes up is, well, Kelly, can I have my emergency savings account with the same bank account that I use for my direct deposit? And I want to encourage you to have a separate bank. And a separate bank so that you can do an online transfer if you need to dip into that account. But I want you to be aware of when you dip into that account. It's too easy when they're in the same account, that you have your direct deposit checking account and then you have that savings account. It's too easy to move money and not really be mindful of that. Oh, I'll just cover it this month and then I'll make it up next month. For step number 2, so that we set you up for success for step number 3, I want to encourage you to have your emergency savings account with a specific number in mind. If that's that 3 months, 6 months, or even some people out there with 12 months, I don't want you to have more than 12 months in an emergency savings account. That tends to be a saver mindset, because I want you to focus on step number 3. If there's too much in emergency savings, then you're not focused on step number 3, which is our key step in this process here. And a question that comes up with emergency savings is, now as we've had interest rate increases, what is the interest rate? And there are different firms that offer different interest rates. So I'll talk about some of them. So Ally Bank is the bank that I hear that has one of the highest interest rates, between 2 and 2.5% online. I want to talk about a resource, an online resource called maxmyinterest.com. And so you can write that down, maxmyinterest.com. And that's an online resource that will look for the highest rate of interest among different online bank accounts out there. And so I do feel that I do think that an online bank is adequate for your emergency savings, as long as you have that online online transfer option for you to access that money. And so that is what I recommend for emergency savings that is in a separate account. Because once you have your emergency savings squared away, you're then able to focus on the 3rd step, which is an investment account, and adding money to your investment account, making your money work for you so that you're generating wealth. And ladies, I want to let you know, step number 3, this is really my secret. Step number 3, and you're going to be like, what? So I'm going to say that step number 3, if you are able to add money to an investment account in a consistent way every month, this is the way to create wealth, to generate wealth. And so we're going to go into more detail about this. So for an investment account, my question to the audience is, do you have an investment account? And so when I pose this to a live audience, and feel free, like I said, for those who continue to add to the interactive feature, is do you have an investment account? And I often, a number of people will raise their hands, and then I ask, who doesn't have an investment account? And that's really the question. And some brave women will raise their hands and say they don't have an investment account. So let's talk about it to see if you have an investment account. So an investment account is different than a bank account. What it does is it gives you a menu of offerings for you to invest and make your money work for you. When you have your money in a bank account, the primary goal for a bank is to make loans and to lend to individuals and to businesses. On the other hand, an investment account is really providing a menu of offerings so that you can make your money work for you. So some of the most popular ones, when I go around a room, I'm based here in Boston, Fidelity, as the largest company, as the headquarters are here. Schwab, I lived in San Francisco for 5 years, its headquarters are there. Vanguard, which often has very low fees. And so those tend to be the 3 largest investment providers. Now, Bank of America, Chase, we talked about some of the providers that have bank accounts. They also have an investment division and offer investment accounts. So there are firms that offer both, but I want to make the distinction. And an investment account, I like to call Fidelity, Schwab, and Vanguard the supermarkets. They're the largest investment providers. They often have the broadest selection with the lowest prices because they are so large. And so if you don't have an investment account, that is what I recommend, is that you open an investment account with one of the supermarkets. And so as we talk about an investment account, a question that often comes up is, well, Kelly, I have a 401k plan, so is that an investment account? So let's talk about your 401k plan. So a company retirement plan is called a 401k plan when it's at the company that you work for. Just say, for example, I did a workshop for Starbucks. And so if you have a 401k and you work at Starbucks, then if you have a retirement plan held at Starbucks as you work at Starbucks, it's called a 401k plan. If you stop working at Starbucks, you get another job and you move to another firm, you have the choice of keeping it at Starbucks or rolling it over to the supermarket. And when a 401k is rolled over to a retirement account, it's called an IRA, an individual retirement account. So for example, at Fidelity, you would open up that IRA and then you would roll it over. And you just have that choice. In my training, I go into more detail about if that's the best option for you. But most of the time, it is a best practice to roll over your 401k plan into an IRA account because you have the broadest selection at the lowest prices. Just with a 401k, you're often given a menu, and you might be given a set menu. There might be target date funds. You may have that option where the year that you retire, say like 2040, 2045, often it seems like a really long time away, and you have a set portfolio. They often give you a menu of options, but you may not have to be the decision maker. And in my training, I go into detail about how you can be the decision maker of choosing with that menu of options. When you then move it over to, say, a Schwab in that IRA, you do become the decision maker. And so just want to make that distinction because that often is what happens. And for those ladies out there who have those existing 401k plans, I talked about Leslie who had a 401k plan she just forgot about. That often is what I hear. So especially, your first or second job out of college, if you hopped around, you might want to check and see if there's a 401k plan. Kelly, how do I do that? So often with the company, there is an HR resource, and you call them up. There often is a phone number you can look up, you can Google, you call them and you ask them. If you work for the company, they have your social security number and you can ask them if there was an account set up in your name. If it's over the last 20 years, then likely if the company offered a 401k plan, you were defaulted into it. So I like to thank my Professor Richard Thaler, who won the Nobel Prize in Economics in 2017. His research allows us to be defaulted into 401k plans because what they found is when people chose human behavior, they forgot to opt into the 401k plan. And so we're now defaulted into that. So I want to encourage you, and I mentioned that you're going to have some action items. I would like you to add that to your action items. And so for your company 401k plan, we're going to talk about that in step number 4. We're going to cover one other step so we come back to this. But I often ask the question with people, do you know how much you're contributing? I want you to know the percentage, and I want you to know if your company offers matching. So I mentioned that I gave a workshop at Starbucks. So Starbucks, they match up to 5%. And so when I was asking people, often they were like, I stop at 5%. And I want you to think about matching as gravy. I want you to think about maximizing your retirement plan. And we'll talk about that in a couple of steps, so I review that. But I want to ask you the question, do you know what those percentages are? Because it's really important for taking personal responsibility that you know what those numbers are. And so going back to step number 3 here for your investment account, that then is related. When you have step 1 and step 2 solid, you have that down. Step number 3 is, are you able, and then you have your company 401k that you have, that you're aware of, like what you're investing in. With the investment account, are you able to add money to your investment account every month on a consistent basis? And for some people, your number one financial goal may be that you're saving for a down payment for real estate. So I have that on this item because that tends to be one of the key goals that people have. That's a huge milestone when you buy real estate. It's one of the largest purchases that you'll make. And you may have money. May have money in an account that's actually not invested. You would actually want to have that money not invested. You would want to have that in cash as you're saving for that. But really, the way to generate wealth is if you have an investment account and you're having it work for you, where it's invested in the market. And we'll talk about that a little bit further. I'm going to show you a slide a little bit later about the power of compounding to really drive this point home. So these are the 3 steps to my Wealthy Warrior Women money system. To be honest, I give this workshop all over the country. There are very few individuals who are on step number 3. And if you are on step number 3, congratulations, you are on your way to building wealth. But often there are areas that need more attention, and that's where most people are. Is it your emergency savings and setting that up, really looking into your 401k plan, really thinking about if you are focused on a down payment for real estate, what is your plan with that? So now let's go through the 3 additional steps that are going to be more succinct. Step number 2, that money system, is really a framework. So step number 3 here is a budget formula for you to just keep in mind. So it's, I call it the 50-30-20 budget formula. 50% for necessities, 30% for variable expenses, and then 20% for that retirement and savings. So let's talk about that. So 50% is for day-to-day expenses, living expenses that you need. And so that includes your rent, that includes your mortgage, that includes your food, that includes your health, going to the gym. 30% is variable expenses. So I like to use the gym example. So I, of course, encourage wellness and good health. And so for variable expenses, are you spending extra money to go to Equinox, Soul Cycle, Flywheel, your specialty gym? And so that is included in the variable expense, where your local gym, your basic gym, I would say, is in your that 50% of your day-to-day living expenses. Another one, I said I was going to refer to weddings. So I put family weddings in the day-to-day living expenses because it's important that we attend our family weddings. However, weddings for friends, it's in the variable expenses, and they're optional. So I often get a buzz in the room when I say that of weddings for friends. The average amount of money that people spend to attend a wedding, really for women, is $650. So if you live in a big city, you're likely spending close to $1,000. And for those who have international friends, so I went to grad school and I had members of my class from different countries. You'll get invited to international weddings. So that is even more expensive. And it's just up to you to be mindful. But those tend to be the budget breakers that I see. And then for this last 20%, I recommend 10% for retirement. That is the amount that I want to encourage people. 10% for your 401k plan. Matching is extra. And then that additional 10% for saving. And I really think about that as what is your number one financial goal. It could be saving for a down payment. It could be if you already have a house for that next investment property, or for step number 3, where you're adding money to an investment account to generate wealth. So now step number 4, we've already really covered it, but maximizing your retirement plan. What I just want to talk about here is I recommend that 10%. And I want you to take a look at one of your action items to review your 401k plan to make sure that you're engaged with that and you're aware of your options. And before I turn it over to questions, I want to talk about step number 5. And this is an ongoing process for you to review your finances. And I call it a finance date night. So I hold a finance date night on a monthly basis in my Facebook group. I have a Facebook group, I still have found that format to be a very engaging format. I post in that nearly every day. There are women who post articles and ask questions, and there's just feedback and for your financial goals. So you can just type in Wealthy Warrior Women. There's actually a link in the links here, but you can type that into Facebook, and then you can join. And I hold this as an example, a monthly date night, but I want to encourage you as a process to manage your ongoing finances is once a month, either the 1st or the 15th, put it in your calendar. Often I recommend at lunch, and review your accounts. And imagine, like I said, you had your expenses with one credit card and you were able to review them with one credit card. You review your student loans, if making sure that those payments are consistent, and then with your investment account, your 401k plan, that you review those in one place. And importantly, that you're reviewing your financial goals. So once a month, you're reviewing your financial goals. And what I like to say is with weddings, it's much easier to make a decision about a wedding when you're reviewing your personal finances than when you're at the bar or at dinner catching up with your friend and you're talking about an amazing wedding that you all, like a friend's wedding that you all want to go to. But when you're reviewing your finances, you get to ask, is it in line with your financial goals? So for example, I had a classmate that was getting married in Australia, and I just didn't, $2,000 was not, I had different financial goals, and I needed that $2,000 to apply for my down payment for my condo, as an example. And so as step number 5, want to encourage that finance date night. And so the 5 steps to creating financial freedom here, the paying off your student loans, the Wealthy Warrior Women money system, that 50-30-20 budget formula, maximize your retirement, ideally that 10%, matching is gravy, that finance date night. And then one other bonus I wanted to mention is speaking. So many of you, you're part of Innovation Women here. Are you leveraging speaking workshops? And I like to use the word workshop because are you teaching something? Because that really is where value is, and often where individuals will pay. And that may be corporations that are looking for what can we teach our employees that will pay for speaking engagements, conferences, even alumni groups. And so I want to encourage you, maybe as you start, you may do some speaking events for free where you're not being paid for that visibility, but want you to create the goal of generating revenue. There's lots of opportunities. Innovation Women highlights opportunities for you to earn money for your specialty in sharing your specialty and expertise with broader audiences. And the potential can be $10,000 to $50,000. So my goal this year is 25 speaking events. I set that in the beginning of the year. I'm at the halfway mark. I actually have completed 13 speaking events, so I'm on track for my 25 speaking events. But I wonder if I had set my goal for 50 speaking events, that perhaps I would have set the bar higher. So for next year, I'm going to do that. And that's just the power of setting goals. And even with our monthly finance date night, I include speaking as a financial goal. So I review that every month to see if I'm on track. Do I need to bring it up more often and make the request for speaking events? Say at corporations, would your company benefit from like my specialty and my expertise? So now I want to turn to some questions. And I just want to highlight some links and resources for us to continue to work together. I'm going to include this here. How I work with clients is I offer an 8-week online course. My next course will start in September. I'll also do one-on-one private coaching for those who want to fast track, just like working with a trainer at the gym. You either like that group environment, such as Weight Watchers, I like to use that as an analogy, or a group training, such as when going to the gym, or you prefer working one-on-one with a trainer to fast track your results. And I want to offer, as details have come up, personal finance is very personal, and so you may have individual questions that I may not have the chance to address. So I'm offering a free session, and so I do this with all of my workshops to invite you to engage in a more meaningful way. And you'd be surprised how much we can cover in a power 20 minutes. We've gone through this information in just 45 minutes. And so I really am able to answer some of your questions in a 20-minute session. And so there is a bit.ly win with money call. You can type that in, and then that is a direct link to my calendar to sign up by August 15th. So you can imagine that there may be, there's more than 100 people signed up for this. And so I welcome you to sign up before August 15th so I can dedicate the time. So now let's turn to some of the questions and refer back to. So someone asked again, what's the best travel card? So that's the Chase Sapphire Reserve. They actually have a reserve which has a higher annual fee, and then there is another option. The annual fee, there are lots of reimbursements for that. So just want to highlight, you can look into the details for that, but notably 3 times the number of miles. The name of the TED Talk is with Simon Sinek, About Your Why. Simon Sinek, S-I-N-E-K. He's amazing. Is it better to have an emergency savings or to pay down credit cards? So what I want you to do is I like to encourage emergency savings of $1,000, even maybe $500 to get you started. And then I want you to have a specific plan to pay down your credit cards. And so if you do have credit cards, that may be something to follow up with me, that I may be able to provide some helpful resources. My only investment account is what was my 401k. I had to convert into a regular investment account, an IRA, to pull money out from my kids' college education. And so what I want to encourage you to do is, so your 401k then, when you moved it to an investment account, became an IRA, and I want to encourage you to set up a general account for you to add more money to your account. You're either maximizing your retirement and or you're adding money to an investment account. How do I price out speaking engagement and workshops? I appreciate that question. I'm not able to go into detail about that on this particular workshop. If you want to follow up with me, then I can provide maybe some additional details. And let me just see here. We have 3 more minutes till we wrap things up here. So I wanted to highlight a couple of more things. So I mentioned the free session to sign up with me for that. I invited you to join my Wealthy Warrior Women Facebook group, where you actually can ask questions so that the audience benefits from that. I engage with that on a daily basis. And then I have a free PDF. So that I want to invite you to join my weekly, I send out a weekly content email, and what I mean by a content email is I'm actually talking about a personal finance topic. This week I'm going to talk about my takeaways from Hamilton, the free PDF is what are the top 10 questions you should be asking yourself. And so that is a popular PDF that has been valuable for audience members. And so with that, I want to just give people an opportunity to ask one more question, but we have covered a tremendous amount today. It's been so amazing to share the 5 steps to create financial freedom with the Innovation Women audience. I'm going to leave you with a slide of how we can connect in different ways. So I want to invite you to be part of my community, for us to engage more so that you can learn more about how I work with my audience members on an ongoing basis. And if any of you work at companies, I'd love to come speak at your company. So I've spoken at Starbucks, Boston Consulting Group, Wistia, and some other companies all across the country. And I think that it's so much fun to encourage women to engage with their money and to invest and make their money work for them. So I want to thank everybody for being so engaged, and let's see if there are any more questions. Bobby, let me just check in. Are there any more questions before we conclude?
Yeah, I think we've got a couple more questions, but before we finish up, I just want to remind everyone that there are attachments and links both to Kelly's information as well as the sign-up to next week's webinar. And also, please give us your feedback. Rate this presentation. We love to get your feedback. And if you are interested in signing up for Innovation Women, the discount code that is good through midnight tonight is in all capital letters, IW Webinar. There is one additional question here, which is, would you still advise emergency savings of only $1,000 if we have kids?
So for emergency savings, I recommend at least 6 months of expenses. If you are starting from scratch, then that's where I recommend $1,000. If you have children and you own a home, I see between 6 months and 12 months is the most common response I get from audience members who have children and own a home. So thank you for that question.
Great. And actually there are a couple of other questions which looks like they are questions for us at Innovation Women. One of them is, will we get a copy of today's presentation? We do send out a link to the recording afterwards, so you'll be getting that. There are also questions about speaking engagements and earning fees. In the speaker resources on innovationwomen.com, there are a number of articles and informational resources there that can tell you more about that. So thank you again, Kelly, for presenting today and being a part of Innovation Women. And thank you all to our guests. Have a good day.
Thank you.